All right, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alex Mason from QTS, and welcome to the next installment of our webinar Wednesday series. First and foremost, thank you all for joining us. Today's title is Go with the Workflow, presented by QTS and our partners from Nintex. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started here. Here's some audio links at the bottom if anyone's having trouble accessing the audiovisual portion of our webinar today. We're also going to keep everyone in mute mode until the Q&A portion, which will be at the end. So a little bit about QTS. Who are we? We are a Microsoft Gold partner and have won Partner of the Year for the New York metro area for 8 of the last 9 years running. We're a systems integrator and managed service provider based in Parsippany, New Jersey. Been around for the last 24 years. We focus on making sure that our customers receive quality technology solutions. Feel free, you can learn a little bit more about us at qtsnet.com or contact me directly if you're interested. So about now, I'm just going to introduce our partners from Nintex, Lauren Phelps and Brad Orlock.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, all. Thank you for joining. This is Lauren Phelps with Nintex, Territory Manager responsible for the New York Metro and Northeast regions. And Bradley, would you like to intro yourself?
Hi, everyone. This is Brad Orlock. I am the technical evangelist covering the East Coast of the United States. I primarily act as a pre-sales engineer for our team and enable our partners like QTS on Nintex technologies.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. Next slide, please, Alex. Okay, so we've got a couple of slides that we're going to cover off up front. I do want to point out that what you will see once we do progress through these slides is in fact a live demo of Nintex for Office 365. We felt it pertinent. There aren't any smoking mirrors here. We want you to get a feel for what the technology is and most notably, giving you the ability to view it in a live environment. So that being said, let's go ahead, jump through a couple of these slides and we'll move forward. Nintex is a company, we have been around since 1999. We released the first iteration of Nintex Workflow in 2003. With the Nintex for Office 365 release, which we're going to focus on today, this actually represents the 5th iteration of the technology. So point being, you can see here we have over 7,000 customers. We're in 90 countries. We're localized in 22 languages. We understand business process automation, and quite frankly, we've really carved this niche, right? People will look at us and say, well, gee, how do you compare to business process management? And the reality is we provide you the ability with extensive velocity to build and configure workflow and or forms in very rapid fashion, right? And that's truly unique to the value prop of Nintex. There isn't, quite frankly, another solution like it. As you can see, we've got a very vast partner network. QTS obviously is one of our go-to partners in the New York metro region. We've won a number of awards. Forrester has said, over the last few years that we are quote-unquote the leading third-party add-on to Microsoft SharePoint. We've also won the Microsoft Partner of the Year award, and that was bestowed upon us last year. And I think that that's really a testament to the technology and how we help enable folks take advantage of their existing investment. We're also the most launched SharePoint add-in for Office 365, and just about a week ago, we did actually receive gold competency in that regard as well. Alex, next slide, please. So the platform itself, think of it in terms of really the marriage, if you will, of people, process, and content, right? If we start to talk about digital transformation, and everyone is really speaking in those terms, Nintex as a company, we find ourselves at the core of that transformation. So it really doesn't matter where the data exists. It really doesn't matter where your users exist either, and quite candidly, it doesn't matter on what device they're using, right? There's a myriad of things that you can do with our platform, and that really helps to drive adoption across functional areas within your organization. And it also gives you a very, very significant ROI. And again, we're all about velocity, and more importantly, we are all about time to value. Next slide, please. So the productivity platform itself, this is really what makes up the suite of Nintex products, if you will. To begin with, of course, there's Nintex Workflow, and this gives you the ability to transform any manual processes across your environment into an automated workflow. Couple that with something like Nintex Forms, which is a direct replacement for InfoPath, and it gives you the ability to create, if you will, even data-driven documents, right? So to have a workflow kicked off by a form, or to have someone, even in a field, maybe it's a pharmaceutical company, right? And you've got one of the sellers that is out at a doctor's office. They can go ahead and access the form outside of the firewall with or without authentication and provide data back to SharePoint, right, to continue any type of process. Leveraging Nintex Mobile, whether it be a Windows phone, an Android device, or an iPhone, you have the ability, again, to interact with SharePoint and with that workflow. Where it starts to get interesting, let's say that I'm at 37,000 feet, I'm traveling to Bellevue. Even if I don't have connectivity, I can still pull up the form on my device. I'll cache that information up until the point where connectivity is restored, and then that will go forth and authenticate back through SharePoint and trigger the balance of that workflow. We also have connectors, so everything that we do, for all intents and purposes, is in fact a no-code approach. You don't have to go through arduous training to leverage the technology. The design canvas and design experience is very good. It's very streamlined. It mimics and models a business flow diagram because, quite frankly, that's what it is. The other point I'll make too is, we have the ability to integrate with any line of business application. And if there isn't a pre-existing action, you can certainly build one leveraging the Nintex SDK, right? So again, extensibility above and beyond SharePoint, whether it be on-prem or in the cloud. And then lastly, DrawLoop. This is really document creation integrated with Salesforce.com. So as you can see now, we're starting to take and merge, if you will, these two disparate ecosystems into a cohesive whole so that you can trigger data-driven documents directly through Salesforce. Next slide, please. Some of the compelling results, your payback, and this was vetted through a Forrester Total Economic Impact study. And I'd even say that, this talks about less than 1 year. The reality is, if you build and configure a workflow, anytime that there's a change to a list or a library, that workflow is going to kick off automatically. Your ROI becomes instantaneous. So again, talking about time to value, an ROI of 178%. And as you vet that across functional areas within your organization, it's one of those rare solutions that will continue to give back to you. The other thing that's worth pointing out too is a 60% reduction in development time, right? Typically an organization, as they're transforming a manual process, if you're doing so in a manual and coding fashion, typically you throw more money and more resources at a problem that becomes increasingly difficult to solve. Whereas by leveraging the Nintex platform, that becomes very, very easy. Next slide, please. Some of our customers, and again, we tout over 7,000 globally. As you can see, the interesting thing about Nintex is it really doesn't matter what vertical the customer exists in because every organization has these manual processes. And this is just a small representation of some of the customers that we do have. Next slide, please. Typically, we pull our partners, we pull our existing customers because we're really concerned with how they drive adoption. And some of the things that resonate are being shown right here. These are really the top processes that are transformed via Nintex across functional areas. And as you can see, as I had alluded to earlier, it really doesn't matter what department. Every organization has these manual processes. And those who are very, very astute at driving adoption, we can point to customers, and there's one notably, they run over 5,000 workflows on a regular basis, right? They've been a partner of Nintex for probably 4 years or so, and what they've done is a very good job of driving adoption across functional areas. Next slide, please. These process automation scenarios are quite frankly anywhere, right? And again, we're taking it a step further, and whether it be from, the consumption of documents or business documents, right, a quarterly business review or financial forecast, or even something like quote to cash or contracts. All of these scenarios, again, exist everywhere, and any one of these can be transformed. I'll tell you a very, very crazy story very quickly. We've got a customer in New York, and one of the admins who actually brought Nintex in was sitting with a friend of hers one day. And as they're having a conversation, it's late in the day, the phone is kind of ringing off the hook, and she says to her friend, well, what is going on? And apparently within this organization, based on the level that you hold within the organization, you're privy to sporting event tickets, right? Knicks, Nets, Giants, Jets, and the like. This woman walks away, she goes back to her desk. She ends up building a workflow that basically now has the ability to, a requester puts forth a request for tickets, the workflow will go ahead and first ascertain whether or not that particular individual has access to said tickets. Secondly, we'll look and see if the tickets are available, and then lastly, we'll go ahead and send a note to the requester letting them know that tickets are available and free for pickup. Now, I know that that is a very, very crazy scenario, but what strikes me as interesting is that, again, it really doesn't matter what the process is. There is always a way to transform it. Next slide, please. This is one of my favorite quotes. Obviously, we all know Costco. I shop there on a very regular basis. But what Jason Smith said is, quote, I would have needed to employ and train 10 developers for what I did by myself with Nintex. And this is what truly speaks to the value prop of what Nintex is and what it can deliver to your organization. Next slide, please. And with that, we like to consider ourselves a PowerPoint-free zone. We're going to go ahead and turn it over to Brad Orluck. Brad is going to take us into Office 365. We'll actually go through a live demo. Bradley?
Thanks, Lauren. Hopefully you can see my screen.
Got it.
Excellent. All right, everyone. So the demonstration I had in mind today is a relatively high-level demonstration just because, again, the fact that we satisfy a number of different horizontal and vertical applications. Sometimes we have audiences on these webinars from a lot of those different specific types of roles and places. So we wanted to make sure we had a very consumable demonstration for you today. So I'm going to take you through our employee leave request demonstration. Amazingly enough, we have employees, they like to take time off, so having this type of approval process really resonates for virtually every one of those various horizontal functions. And again, what we can do a little bit later or offline is, have a more in-depth and vertical/horizontal specific demonstration for you with the QTS team, so they can definitely take you through some of the other scenarios that we have around things like, applications of client intake at a law firm or financial services applications, etc. So a lot of just great functionality that we can offer to you, but again, for the sake of the demonstration, we're going to take you through an employee leave demo. So as you can see, I am currently logged into Office 365. Our products do exist for both Office 365 and on-premises SharePoint. And we're actually getting ready to launch our SharePoint 2016 offering, so it doesn't really matter where you are in the SharePoint ecosystem, will be applicable to you. But you'll notice that, again, I am doing this demo from Office 365 today. I'm logged in as one Richard Rowe, that handsome gentleman up in the right-hand corner. And I also have another web browser open, and I'm logged in as one Jane Doe, which would be Richard's manager, line of business manager. So we can go through the approval process and have Jane act as the approver for these specific time-off requests. So before I actually get into the demonstration of the products, one thing I always like to talk about is our ease of use and ease of deployment, especially in the Office 365 SharePoint Online stack. It's really a very simple affair because typically when we talk about enterprise software, it's usually a rather large rigmarole we have to go through with deploying that and getting that instituted into our various change control processes and enterprise adoption. Again, nice thing about Nintex, we can slipstream right into a SharePoint Online tenant, for example. So you're going to notice I'm just going to navigate over to the cog and then add an app. And literally a single time we have to do this, we just would navigate to the SharePoint Store. So you'll see that over here on the left, and we'll add the app. The app's already been added to my site, so it wouldn't be very much fun if I didn't show you the store experience, but we'll take you through that real quick. Not really sure why my graphic in the background bleeds through into the store. That's kind of distracting. But if you'll follow along with me, you'll notice right here on the main landing page for the SharePoint Store, you'll see Nintex Workflow. So the Nintex Workflow and Forms apps can be added. You'll just simply click on them and then hit Add, and you'll trust our apps. The beauty is it's really just installing a small conduit into your SharePoint tenancy. There's no real software to install because we're for truly a software as a service in Office 365 especially. So you'd be up and running very, very quickly. Now, I'm going to go ahead and navigate back over to my SharePoint site, and I'm going to drill into my employee leave scenario right here. So you're going to notice that the employee leave portal consists of a couple of SharePoint lists. So I have a leave request list, and then I also have a leave calendar list that is basically set to display items in a calendar fashion. So typically the experience for an average user would be navigating to this portal and going up here and clicking on new item and creating a new item. Now the other thing to point out would be that affair is typically pretty pedestrian in the sense that a new item would be added to the list through a standard out-of-the-box SharePoint list form. Now, again, pretty functional for a lot of different scenarios, but also equally very limited as well. So you'll notice right here on the left-hand side I have various pieces of metadata. So these columns right over here are showing up on my list form. I can do things like hide these or maybe reorder them, but that's really about it. Anything else I want to do from a forms perspective, if I want to add any kind of validation, logic, maybe I just want to make it consumable on a mobile device or arguably a little more attractive, I'll have to do something like leverage InfoPath, which we now know is deprecated, or I would have to do some kind of custom development work to create a new form. So enter Nintex Forms first. So I'm going to take you through the forms side of this solution before we even go through the workflow, because again, the way we look at Nintex Forms and workflow, forms are essentially the user interface for a process that we've automated with Nintex Workflow. So that's why we like to call it the Nintex Workflow Platform. So let's go ahead and go back over to our list and notice right here up on the ribbon, when we've added the Nintex Forms and the Nintex Workflow apps, they integrate directly into the ribbon on the top. So the experience is very accessible for virtually any user. So in this case, I want to modify the form. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on Nintex Forms. Now, because, actually before I even get into that, notice right here what we're actually doing is we're streaming the designer to your web browser on the fly. So again, no bits to update or load into your SharePoint Online tenancy. On-prem, there would just be a little bit of code that you would deploy inside of SharePoint, but everything is rendered inside the browser. So no worries or no need to worry about doing something like deploying a client installation to your users out in the field. They'll just access it right through their web browser. But you'll notice right here that this interface is very, very reminiscent of SharePoint itself. So we have that familiar look and feel of the ribbon along the top. On the left-hand side, we have the various controls that we can drop into our forms. And then to the right, you'll see we have a layout dialog that we control the various layouts that we want to use. And I'll get back to that in just a minute. But dead center, we actually have an Nintex form. So we have the design canvas, and this is where we actually can drag and drop elements and really build up the composite of the form itself. Now, you're going to notice that there's already some things in here, and the reason for that is we have the idea of a base form or a template that can simply consume the various columns on your SharePoint lists or libraries and put labels in for you and the associated connected controls. So what that really does is it kind of smooths out the learning curve a little bit to be able to have your, more junior users, your business users, your less IT and dev-centric users be able to hit the ground running. Now, if I come in here and I want to, doctor this form up to any way I see fit, I can certainly do that. So I can simply, click on controls and, I could move them around if I wanted to. In this case, I'm just going to delete those because I don't need them. Maybe I'll drag these ones up. Maybe at this point, I want to, again, maybe dress this form up a little bit. So I can easily click on something like a button or, excuse me, a label control. And, maybe I want to do this. I just want to make it a little bit more attractive, leveraging, things like a format painter. So if you've used any of the Office suite before, you know how to essentially use all of the desktop publishing facets of Nintex Forms, for example. So again, learning curve is greatly reduced in that case. It's also worth pointing out, again, depending on who your audience would be, who would be leveraging this technology, what I just showed you is something that a line of business person could definitely do themselves. But if you also have, say, developers on your staff who would be using this Nintex tool to build out forms, they can do things in a more programmatic fashion, because if I simply double-click on one of these controls, notice again a very user-friendly type of configuration dialog opens. But I did want to point out that if I go down to our formatting column, notice how I have things like a CSS class. Now, for my more basic users, they're never going to go in there and change that. But I may have a developer who wants to leverage, their web development skills and simply do what I just did with my format painter in a more programmatic fashion by building out a CSS class and then applying that class to the controls. So again, the product scales incredibly well from your novice all the way up to your developer users. So very, very powerful. Notice too on the left-hand side, I can easily insert referential data into my form. So, common system data like the current date and time. Perhaps, if the form is open in a specific mode, I want to reference that. That's really more pertinent when I start getting into creating rules, because maybe I want to show certain fields and certain controls only if it's in edit mode versus new mode. But again, I can easily reference that. Additionally, I can easily reference any of the metadata that would be stored against the item inside of SharePoint itself. Plus, we have things like inline functions. So inline functions, we also have runtime functions for that matter. Inline functions happen server-side, so these are actually happening inside the cloud servers. So what it really means for the more average user is if I want to, manipulate string data or, do anything like that, maybe replace values, I can do that without having to write custom JavaScript. So that just becomes powerful because, again, as a non-developer, I can work with something like an inline function versus having to know syntax to write code. So kind of a big point of departure. But again, inline functions as well as runtime functions exist in the product to make your life easy. So we'll go ahead and scoot that back a little bit. And right here, maybe we want to build a little bit of logic into this form. We like the way it's kind of looking right now. Maybe we want to, scoot this down and we want to start creating, some headers in between things. I can easily do that by simply just grabbing, controls and placing them onto the form. And this free-form drag-and-drop type of design interface just really makes my life easy. So I don't have to know how to, build out anything programmatically. I can just do it this way. So maybe I want to say, attachments, and I can hit save, and that's the name that's going to be in there for me. And if I wanted to, possibly put a background image here, I could easily do that. Or better yet, instead of using a panel for grouping purposes, maybe I wanted to use a label instead. So again, I can easily grab these various controls and drag them and move them around, and it's just really one of those things where I don't have to really get into the nitty-gritty. So in this case, we'll say attachments, because we want to put a little category header right here, and again, I'll move these controls up, and to save myself some time, maybe I'll right-click on this particular attachment control, which has a label, and I'll hit copy. I'll go up here, and I will hit paste. So I know that seems very basic and pedestrian in and of itself, copying and pasting, but when it comes to development of things like forms and workflows, that is an incredible time saver. And I'll show you that on the workflow side as well. At this point, we'll just say time off details. And again, you get the gist of what I'm doing here. So again, I can easily start building out these types of, nuanced, forms with a great deal of relative ease. For good measure, maybe I'll scoot this down and I'll put something else into right here. So I'll go ahead and hit paste, and we'll just say, dates. Oops. Let's go ahead and click in here, and we'll say dates. And we'll save this. So now I'm starting to see everything I really want to have inside my form. And again, I didn't have to do anything complex to start building this out. Now maybe I want to put a little bit of logic in so that if a user requests, we'll say sick leave, they may have no idea what their end date would be. So what we could do is, now when you make a mistake like that, the nice thing is right up here, I have an undo button. Yay! So modern conveniences for the forms design experience is what we have. But again, going back to my leave type, if a user selects sick leave, maybe I want to hide the end dates. Maybe those wouldn't make any sense to show on the form themselves. So what I can do here is I can easily select those controls, and I can click right up here and add a rule. And we have the rules pane that opens up. So at this point I can just say, hide if sick. And we have both formatting and validation rules. So if we want to control, the way something looks, that's going to be formatting. Validation would be if, a certain value wasn't put into another control or a section wasn't completed on the form, no problem. We can easily validate that. And it's worth pointing out that we can throw a custom error message right down here. So that's pretty significant, especially when we talk about SharePoint, because SharePoint's error messages are stored inside of files inside of the server environment, and modifying those is not really practical. So we want to be able to throw a custom error message, and we can do that right inside of Nintex Forms. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and do something quick. Operators, again, these might look scary a little bit, the syntax, but if you hover on any one of these down at the bottom, or the little hover helper will pop up, tells you exactly what they are. So they're really just about building out some logic. If you need to logically evaluate something, you can do that. So at this point, again, referencing all of the other information on the form, I'm just going to say, well, if my leave type is equal to, and we'll say sick leave, I'm going to go ahead and hide. Notice right down here I've hide. I'm going to hide these controls because that wouldn't make much sense to show off. So we'll go back up here, and I'm going to go up here and I'm going to preview this. And this is also nice to show you because, unlike some of the box tools that are out there, you don't have to publish this or send it over to Internet Explorer to preview it beforehand. We can actually preview right inside of the tool itself. So if I go in here and I say sick leave, notice how that section just simply collapsed down for me. So Nintex does all the heavy lifting for you. These forms are full HTML5 forms at runtime. So for the non-technical out there, that just means they'll look and feel the same across any modern browser. So it doesn't matter if it's Internet Explorer, Edge, Firefox, Safari, etc. They'll all look and feel virtually identical, which is really, really nice. So we all like consistency, right? So this is pretty good so far. The only other thing I really want to point out to you is the fact that maybe I want to make this consumable on another platform because Richard is the kind of guy who's not in the office very often. Let's be honest, it's not a super fun experience navigating into a SharePoint list from a mobile browser. So maybe we just want to make the form consumable itself directly on the mobile device. So enter Nintex Mobile. As well as the Nintex mobile layouts. So if I wanted to make this consumable on a smartphone with a single click, I can have that available to me. Now, as I mentioned, Nintex Mobile. So let's go ahead and click on Nintex Mobile Tablet because I'm actually going to show this off on an iOS device. I've got an iPad. So what you see right here is simply another form layout, but the beauty of this is this will actually be rendered as though it was custom developed for whatever particular platform is consuming it. So what Lauren mentioned earlier was that we offer a discrete mobile application for iOS, so all of our Apple products, Android, as well as Windows Modern. So basically Windows above, and that's both the desktop and the mobile platforms. So virtually any device that you have out there, you can have what again looks and feels like a custom developed interface and form that all you've done is created another form layout inside of our forms designer. So no need to roll up your sleeves and learn Swift or Objective-C or any other nuanced programming language because you're just building a form. So pretty cool stuff. And then beyond that, we have pretty advanced things like maybe we want to grab some geolocation information. We can easily do that with a simple drag and drop. It's really that easy. So I think I'm pretty satisfied right here. We have repeating sections, et cetera, et cetera. I'm satisfied. Maybe if I wanted to, I could export this form and maybe take it over to another site collection if I wanted to. Don't need to call up IT to do that. Very easy. Form settings, just a lot of stuff behind the scenes that if you want to leverage any kind of customization or maybe some custom JavaScript to extend it even further, you could do that. So a lot of great stuff. Lauren is probably laughing right now, but I always say help that's genuinely helpful in our product. And what I mean by that is we have live help that you can simply navigate to, and it's context sensitive. So this, again, speaking of learning curves and smoothing them out, this really allows your users to spend less time, digging through documentation because it's pertinent to them when they're actually building something. So pretty powerful stuff. But let's go back to our form. Again, we're satisfied with the way this looks. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to publish this form. So you're noticing that I'm just going to confirm this and hit publish. We'll wait a couple seconds. Well, it goes through its gyrations and it's done. So let's go ahead and click OK. We'll close the forms designer. Now, again, if I was consuming this particular process from a desktop machine, if I go into this leave request list now and I go to items and I click on new item, you're going to notice an arguably more attractive Nintex form has been placed on this particular list. So there it is. Looks just the way I wanted it to, essentially. Again, things like sick leave, if I select that, notice how that section simply collapsed down for me. But perfect. Now what about that mobile experience? We want to actually kick off this approval process behind here that users are going to be going through when they request time off. Well, let me go ahead and show you what this looks like on my iPad. This is where I say hopefully the Reflector app will come up and I can show it to you. So let's give this a quick shot. It's thinking about it. Live demonstration, everybody. That's why we love to do live demos, because we want to show you what the technology actually does. But thankfully, this isn't an Nintex issue. This is a Reflector issue. Perfect, got it. All right, so let's go ahead and minimize that down. So you're going to see this is my iPad. Nothing too fancy about it. Down at the bottom, you're going to notice Nintex Mobile, and that's actually tied back to this Office 365 demo tenancy. So I'll go ahead and touch that. And you're going to see a whole bunch of forms that are listed inside of Nintex Mobile. So these are other forms that I have access to based on my SharePoint permissions, and they're all surfaced inside of the Nintex Mobile application. Now, this is also a good time to point out that Nintex Mobile is a free app, so there's no need to purchase it if you're using Nintex Forms and Workflow. But if you'd like to, you could purchase our enterprise version of Nintex Mobile, which does allow you to do things like essentially craft or obfuscate and filter which forms are surfaced inside the mobile app. And you can also control the branding as well as the delivery of the app. So it doesn't have to be called Nintex Mobile. It could be called, Acme Widget Company mobile app, and it could have your own custom colors and logos and such, and only surface very specific things. So in a larger enterprise, sometimes our free version of the app can be overwhelming because too many forms would be showing up, versus using the enterprise version of our product to scope that down to, say, specific business units. So lots of great capabilities on that front as well, so it's worth pointing that out. Plus that can also be delivered either over the air or via an MDM solution as a standalone, corporate signed app. So depending on what your policies are, we can suit virtually any one of those different scenarios. But in this case, again, I'm just doing the basic demo, so I'm going to do a quick refresh on this particular list of forms, and you'll notice right at the top, my leave request form is now showing up there. So great. I'll go ahead and tap on that. And you'll see, again, maybe my layout, I had to tweak it a little bit more, but essentially everything is right there and ready to rock and roll. So perfect. I can go in here and start populating this form as I see fit. Now, I'm going to intentionally make a mistake on my title. So we're just going to say, Richard, and we'll just put a bunch of junk in there, leave type. Notice how things like choice controls, now again, these are all rendered as the iOS platform renders them. So if I go in here, well, we'll say sick leave. Notice how that end date disappeared. So even the rules are respected into the mobile version of the application as well. In this case, I'll change it back to annual leave. You'll notice the end date came back. But what I wanted to point out was things like date pickers, choice controls, etc., are all rendered as the native way that they would be done on that device. So in this case, date controls are, in radial dials on Apple products. This would be a tile-based look and feel if this was on a Windows device. So again, Nintex essentially does all the heavy lifting on the back end for you. So in this case, that's fine, April 20th, and we'll just we'll say the end date. We'll pick some arbitrary date and time. Pick 7 days out. Description, headed to the beach. So who doesn't like to go there? Maybe I want to take a picture and attach it. I can do that. Notice I strategically have a picture of a beach here. So this is in Honolulu, I believe. I'm going to go ahead and head in here, and notice here too, just because Nintex Mobile, this is kind of an edge case that I would be attaching something to a leave request, but maybe this could be a doctor's note, etc. But I could easily feed this directly back into SharePoint as attachment metadata. But I might have, folks working on a dock, inspectors out in the field who are taking, pictures of things, but maybe they may need to take some notes on those pictures. So notice how I edited this, and I can hit draw, and I can easily have a palette of different tools to draw. So I say, wish you were here. Great. And I'll hit So that's there. I'm going to go ahead and hit done. Save out that attachment. I'm going to go back, simply hit attach. Notice I can actually select multiple attachments if I so choose, but in this case I just want the one. So I'll hit attach, and you'll see that's attached down at the bottom. The geolocation control I dropped in here, after the fact, again, maybe we want to find out where people are in the field collecting this information. I can easily tap on that control and, find out. And I'm just going to say, I'm not sure if I've got it. Oh, I do have it turned on. Okay, good. So we'll scoot this back. This is where we say, come on, Internet, I know you can do it. Let's go ahead and see a map. Maybe. Thinking about it. We'll go here, try it one more time. I was going to say that's interesting. That's actually coming from the Apple Maps API, so hopefully it's going to load up a map in the background, but it doesn't even matter. The coordinate is captured. The neat thing about our product is the fact that we can take something like a GPS coordinate that we capture, and Nintex Workflow has the ability to integrate with other platforms, so I could pass this value to, say, some kind of GIS system. If I was a municipality that was doing tax assessments on various parcels of land, or if I have, again, field engineers who are inspecting and working with things in the field, maybe I want to find out where they are. But I could actually resolve this also against, say, another platform. Like, in one of our examples, we can actually take these coordinates and feed them to the Google Maps API and receive back a closest physical address to this coordinate. So then I could dispatch someone with a task with Nintex Workflow to maybe go to that place and do something. So that's essentially the capabilities you start having, is these layered functionalities that allow you to approach business problems and easily address them without having to write any kind of code. So now that this is completed, I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. I'm going to go up here quickly and go to my outbox, because I want to show you, as Lauren mentioned, if I'm doing something in a vacuum, essentially in a connectivity vacuum, I can easily have these submissions cached. Now you're going to notice I'm connected, so that disappeared. But if I was disconnected, if I didn't have cellular coverage in my area, if I wasn't connected to the Wi-Fi, no problem. That would simply cache in the mobile device until that connectivity was restored. So pretty cool stuff. It's worth pointing out, just to, again, address lots of different potential scenarios. It's worth pointing out that we do have things like barcode scanning, we do have repeating sections, etc. So lots of great capabilities. We're actually building out a signature control inside of our Nintex mobile offering as well. So again, lots of great scenarios, lots of great things you could do with that platform. So let's go ahead and hop over here, and I'm going to do a quick refresh. We noticed that we did get a notification letting us know that my annual leave request was received. So if I do my refresh, notice here that the title, I typed in Richard and some junk, and I think it changed it into Richard Trend. But the nice thing about Nintex workflow is that it's very easy to do things like normalized data, because we typically find that users are in a rush, they're trying to do things quickly, and they may, fat finger something they're entering on the data entry side of things, but Nintex workflow can easily, concatenate, say, a username, a leave type, and when they submitted it, to easily kind of normalize that data and make it findable inside of SharePoint. But let's go ahead and click on that submission. Now we're going to see all the metadata that was collected from Nintex Mobile is now inside of my form, inside of SharePoint. Yay. Even things like my attachment metadata. If I click on that, wish you were here. Yay. And again, I didn't have to do any kind of custom coding to get this in there. That all came right from the camera hardware inside of my mobile device. So pretty cool stuff. Let's go ahead and close this down, and we'll talk about the workflow process. So the workflow that I have associated with this leave request list, anytime a new request shows up in the list, it automatically kicks off an approval process. So it'll send it over to my manager for approval. We noticed that workflow started because we received a notification. So that means if we hop over to Jane's view of the world, Jane should have a task telling her that she needs to approve this request. And you'll see right here. So let me try and make this a little bit bigger. So you'll see right here that we have a task assigned to approve annual leave request from Richard. That's fantastic. So all the metadata is available to me right here inside of the email. So again, very, very handy. Now there's multiple ways I can approve this task. So the traditional SharePoint-centric way of doing it would be, clicking on this link right here and actually navigating to a task form inside of SharePoint and saying, clicking on approve or reject. Now, we have that same type of experience, but notice here we have an InText form associated with this particular task. So What does that mean? Well, instead of it being just that standard SharePoint list form that's very basic and not very customizable, all the things I showed you with Nintex Forms can be applied here. So I can build validation in. I can actually capture things like comments to a variable instead of having to write them into a SharePoint list and then say query them out with the workflow. It just makes my life significantly easier when I'm building a solution around that kind of task type process. I can even take things like right here. Notice how this is all the information about the request itself. By default, SharePoint tasks don't surface the information about the request. You have to actually drill back into the list form that was initially responsible for starting the workflow. So we can surface all of that metadata and again, make it very easy for you to not waste a ton of time. So again, I can go in here, I can click on approved or rejected. Perfect. But what about those other two ways I can approve this? If I go back to the email, you'll notice right here that I have a little Nintex set of buttons. So if I click right here on Nintex, what you'll see is we actually have an Outlook add-in. So notice how that I'm actually in the web app version of Outlook, so that's pretty significant in and of itself. So I can actually approve or reject this right from inside the email itself. So a lot of folks have asked for buttons so they can click on approve and reject right side, right inside the email. Terrific. There it is. So I can say, have fun, and then click on approved, and the task will be responded to. So very, very powerful. This app is available from the Office Store and is available for, again, the web app version of Outlook and the standalone 2013 and 2016 versions of Outlook. So it doesn't matter what platform you're on, as long as it's relatively modern, you'll be off to the races. Now, another really unique way of us being able to respond to this task that is completely unique to Nintex is via what we call lazy approval. You may not want to call it lazy approval internally. We don't want to insinuate anyone is lazy or derelict in their duty. It's actually, a little side story. We were founded by a bunch of folks in Australia, and lazy is just another way of saying efficient in Australia. So it's efficient approval, if you will. And what this allows me to do is, by simply using natural language, I can respond to this task by using the outcome names. I can say approved or I can say rejected. And that's very significant because, Jane has all the information she needs to make this decision, so she can look at this and go, okay, these dates are perfectly fine with me. So from her mobile phone, for example, because again, maybe she's not in the office, maybe she doesn't want to navigate into SharePoint to approve this task, right from her phone, she could just simply say approved and click send. And what will happen is that will be submitted back into SharePoint, and Nintex Workflow will pick up that approval response and parse it out and move on with the workflow process. So I'll go ahead and minimize that, hop back over to Richard's side, and I'll do a quick refresh. Hopefully any moment we will see that task responded to. If you're impatient like me, you'll just keep hitting refresh. There we go. So we can see the task has been responded to. So the time off was approved and hence added to that shared calendar. So now the team has visibility that Richard will be out of the office on those dates. And we even received the notification via email letting us know that our time off request was approved. So again, that's an end-to-end scenario that's very, very easy to automate with Nintex Workflow and Forms. So now, how did we build the workflow, or how easy is it to build the workflow? Let me go ahead and show you that piece real quick. So navigating over to my leave request list, if I go up to the ribbon right here, we'll click on Nintex Workflow. So again, being a SaaS offering, we're loading up that designer from Azure right now, and we will be greeted with the Nintex Workflow Gallery screen momentarily. I would say there's some ferrets in Azure this this afternoon, but could just be my my internet connection's been squirrely today. So there we go. Thanks, Time Warner. Okay, so let's see. We've got the workflow gallery loaded up here, and you'll notice right up here we can create a brand new workflow. We also can manage existing workflows that may be bound to this particular list or library. In this case, I could open this workflow up and just show it to you, but that's no fun. Let's actually build it. So if we click right here on Leave Requests and New Workflow, you'll notice that I'm now inside of the Nintex Workflow Design interface. And right along the top, again, familiar look and feel of the ribbon. Left-hand side, instead of controls for a form, I have various actions that I can use inside of my workflow. And then dead center, I have a design canvas with a start and a finish and a single insertion point. I can start dragging and dropping these actions out to my workflow. So in this case, if I was replicating this leave request process, chances are I'd probably want to, send somebody an email. Notice I can search my actions to speed things up a little bit. But I'm going to send somebody an email. After that, I probably want to assign a task to the manager. And then after that, I probably want to, if say it's approved, I want to create that shared calendar entry. Now, I'll probably also want to communicate to that user that it was either approved or rejected, but before I get to that, this is where we talk about how easy Nintex is. So let's go back up to this send an email action. Notice it has a little exclamation point. That's just telling me it's not properly configured. So I'll just simply double click on it and I'll populate a few fields. So I have a subject, and a body that are asterisked, meaning I have to actually put information in there to make them work. So in this case, I could hard code a value like Joe Smith at mycompany.com, and again, that's a pretty static way of building out a workflow. So I probably wouldn't want to hard code a value in these particular fields. I'd rather use that referential data. So notice right here I have this little picker icon. And I can easily say, okay, well, where do I want to pull this email address from? It could be a workflow variable. It could come from a list item, so the current item and all of its fields, or maybe workflow context. And this is where, again, Nintex starts differentiating itself. From here, I want to send this notification to whomever starts the workflow. So I can easily reference whoever started the workflow by just inserting the initiator reference. Then from here, I can go in and say my subject. And I can say, your leave request for, and maybe the type of leave request. So notice on the right-hand side, all of that metadata is available to me. So I can go over here and say, whatever that leave type is, and just double-click on it. I can say that leave request for, sick leave has been received. And then down here, one thing I do want to draw your attention to, just because, again, I also think it's a rather large differentiator with our product, is our email service option here. With Nintex workflows, especially in Office 365, we can email outside of the tenancy. So workflows that are built with out-of-the-box tools, such as SharePoint Designer in Office 365, they're bound to the tenant. So you can't actually send an email notification to anyone outside your organization, which is a huge roadblock to a lot of business processes. We can easily do that. Plus, we can even send that attachment metadata along with the notification. So pretty powerful functionality that you get with Nintex. Back on task, we'll just say, dear, maybe, the user's name I want to reference. We're going to go back to that workflow context, and we'll say the display name. So, and then we'll say blah, blah, blah. And we'll save that. And notice that action is now configured. My exclamation point is gone, and maybe I want to save myself some time, and I want to make this process something that can be inherited by someone else. God forbid I'm hit by a bus or I take a new job. I don't need to basically have to explain what this process does, because I can actually annotate it right inside of the workflow itself. So I can say this is where we notify initiator, and notice how even if I can't spell, the browser will pick that up, initiator of workflow start. So pretty cool stuff. Now, back down here, notice how I have those places where I want to send some additional notifications. Let's save myself some time. Let me copy these. If I'm doing something like this inside of SharePoint Designer, nope, I'd have to just recreate it from scratch in each one of these places. And that's a huge, huge black hole of your time. And I can simply go in here and say, rejected, and I can say, oops, actually I'm on the wrong side. This side's rejected. I can say rejected. This one will be approved. And notice I'll go in here, and again, with just a minimal amount of effort, I can do, but you get the point. The point is I don't have to retool that and reconfigure it from scratch. So a lot of sophistication there. This is a very simple process I've built out very quickly. And again, this can scale very, very quickly, because I can even do things like copying entire sections of workflow, and maybe I want to add another layer of approval. Well, I can do that with a single copy and paste. So I'll let your imaginations run wild with the complexities that you can build out with that. I'm running close on time here. Left-hand side, I just want to point out that out of the proverbial box, we have over 200 actions available to you. So those are, things related to SharePoint, like checking things in and out or creating list items, to maybe reaching into a SQL database hosted inside of Azure. I can easily do that. Maybe I want to reach into a OneDrive for Business site, or maybe I want to work with another site collection or another Office 365 tenancy. I have all of these various actions. Maybe I want to reach into Dynamics Online, or I want to reach into Salesforce. We have integration with all of these various platforms with our Nintex connectors, plus sophisticated logic and flow constructs. So if I need to do, conditional branching, if I need to do looping or for each looping, I have all of those things. If I want to process things in parallel, maybe I want to do, multiple parallel approvals, I can easily do that kind of stuff. And I don't have to engage developers to do this. I can build this out myself. So very, very easy to do. Switches, state machines, again, lots of sophisticated types of processes, integration with things like Yammer and Azure and the like, even LinkedIn and Twitter for that matter. So lots of great capabilities, lots of great ways to work with advanced types of data, and at the end of the day, when it comes to integration, anything with a SOAP or a REST API for the for the dev types on the call, you can integrate Nintex workflows with it. So lots of capabilities. And as we introduce more functionalities, you'll notice that we have the Nintex Store, and you can easily add those additional capabilities to the product. So you're not limited in any way. DocuSign, for example, if I wanted to send out documents attached to items and get signatures and bring those back into SharePoint, simple drag and drop type affair. So that's really all I want to take you through today. We'll kick it back over to the QTS team for QA. Thank you.
Great. All right. That was fantastic. Brad, thanks so much for taking us all the way through the process there, and then that was really great. Okay, so I'm just gonna pop this up real quick. Okay, hold on 1 second. There we go. All right, so let's pick it back up where we left off on the deck. Thanks again, guys, for that fantastic demo. So before we get into our call to action, I just wanted to explain the Microsoft Solutions Framework. As both Nintex and QTS are both Microsoft partners, I think this is a good place to kind of talk about that. So we've molded a lot of our solutions around the Microsoft Solutions Framework. Our first option, the Quick Design, is actually phase 1 and 2 of the MSF. So that's really identifying the problem, envisioning a solution, planning out the engagement. This is where, if you have an EA, this is where vouchers can be used. Stage 3 of the MSF is equipped to or equivalent to our quick start, really getting the project started, standing it up, developing, the different phases of the project, as well as determining what your outcome is going to be. And the entire cycle is what we call our quick deploy. So that's a full service managed experience. It's really tailored specifically to your organization and the needs that you're trying to overcome. So our calls to action, you can engage QTS in a roadmap or a strategy meeting. You can leverage those vouchers for a quick design planning deployment service. If you have training vouchers, we do training around Windows 10, SCCM, and a couple of other different technologies. But specific to this webinar, we have an introductory discount on your first Nintex project with QTS. You can reach out to me directly or to your account manager for details. A couple of other housekeeping items. Feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. Keep an eye out for QuikInVision 2016, our annual technology conference in New York, September 13th. And we have, for the rest of Q2 and Q3 and Q4, our webinar and seminar series, which if you're on our distribution list, you'll probably hear about. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me as well.